a cigarette, you will not regret me if I fall.
Okay. Hello everyone and welcome to the parallel session on health. And we had some technical issues with the streaming, so that's why we're a little bit late. Hope it's okay now. My name is Marius Widerøe, and I'm the director of NTNU Health, which is Health and Life Sciences actually, which is one of NTNU's strategic research areas. And today we will talk about how transforming healthcare in Europe and the power of AI and digitization in that sense. And the backdrop here is that there's the sustainability of the European healthcare system is under pressure. We have shortage of healthcare workers across Europe. There's overuse of health services, increasing health disparities, and a changing demographics with an aging population and more multimorbidity among our citizens. And digitization and artificial intelligence has generally been thought to have the potential to transform healthcare sector by improving the quality, accessibility, and efficiency of the healthcare services and making it more economically and socially sustainable. But the digitization has been slow due to the complexity of healthcare systems, the lack of labeling, certification, and reimbursement schemes for products and services, and insufficient access to patient data, and of course lack of trust, transparency, and accuracy standards in a lot of the digital and artificial intelligence solutions. So there are also significant challenges and risks related to data privacy and security, the human-AI interactions, algorithmic bias, fairness, and a variety of ethical and legal and social implications related to AI in health. So, to boost the digitization of European healthcare, EU has taken several steps so far. The European health data space is under construction with the aim to improve health data access for cross-border health services, but also for research and innovation, which is important. And the medical device regulation has recently been updated to also include and be very relevant for artificial intelligence. And the new AI Act aims also to ensure better conditions for the development and use of AI technology also in healthcare. So in this session, we will first hear from our keynote speakers about how AI and data-driven science can benefit and transform healthcare, and also about the potential risks and challenges and ethical questions associated with both research, but also in the introduction of new AI technology in health. And afterwards, the panelists or the speakers will join me for a panel conversation about how research and innovation in AI can contribute to solving major health challenges in European healthcare. So first, I will like to introduce our first speaker, Kerstin Bach. You can come up. She's a professor of artificial intelligence at NTNU. She's also a research director at the NorwAI, a research center for AI innovation in Norway. And her research has been focused on developing AI prototypes in healthcare, intelligent sensing, and knowledge management. And she has been involved in a number of interdisciplinary projects that work on understanding how healthcare data, and developing novel healthcare services. So she will give us a talk now about the current and future trends in AI for healthcare. So welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, and good morning, and thanks for the invitation. I might take a little step back and talk about also where we are coming from to understand the current trend or hype around AI. But first of all, I'd like to give a brief definition of AI, because often I feel that people have an understanding or think they have an understanding what it is. That's very easily very briefly to say what AI is defined in the textbooks we use, so which is the study of intelligent agents that receive percepts from the environment and take actions. And what we try to do, and this is the underlined part, is to have a function that maps these perceptions into actions. To make this a little bit more simple, we have a little intelligent agent, which is what we program, and then this thing interacts with an environment. An environment could be a park that has different sensors, and then we basically receive perceptions. So we basically get counts, we can get the temperature, we can get the amount of people that are currently in the park, and then we basically could say, yeah, now it's a good time to take a walk. Of course, this action will interact with the environment, and this is my point here. We have this loop where we kind of have an interaction. So we say, oh, it's a good time to walk in the park. Many people go, oh, then the sensing goes, oh, now it's really busy, so you shouldn't go. So this kind of interplay is something we try to anticipate and interact with as AI researchers. This environment could be anything. So this could be a co-pilot conversation. So when we have this conversation, an AI can build a context. So we basically keep information from a conversation in order to give better responses. So this is really about better responses in terms of beautiful responses, not necessarily true responses in terms of large language models. Another thing could be a patient profile. So if we have information about a patient, and then we basically do a recommendation of a treatment, and then we again measure and interact with the system. So what our intelligent agent in the conceptual phase is doing with this perceive and take action is something that we bring into different fields, which I'll be focused on. And of course, you all know there is a huge hype on AI, and this is what I have tried to just visualize. So if I looked into PubMed and just filtered out the number of publications on AI that have been brought out, and it's of course clearly to see there's something happening from 2007 up until 2020, roughly 2020. Just since it's really hard to read, I just put a log scale here. So you can also see some smaller waves fairly earlier on. And I would briefly want to explain why this happened. So if we have a timeline, and again, if we look into these early ages, so this is when DARPA founded the Dartmouth seminar or summer research project, where a number of researchers were just set out to say, we have this idea on, we can use computers to kind of do artificial intelligence tasks, or we can use computers to kind of mimic how we work. And this is where they actually coined the term artificial intelligence, and also claimed that it was easy to use, and it was easy to just get things running. Funding came in, and I think the biggest part was the neural networks that have been developed. So that was like the first little hype. Of course, what happened was there was a lot of unmatched expectations, and the funding broke down again. So we had a good period of almost 20 years where artificial intelligence again went down and was not so much funded, or also not so much research was conducted. Back in the 80s, we had a lot of approaches that we still use today. I'll not go into details due to time, but neural networks, the first ways of using neural networks, as well as genetic programming. And you might have heard about Deep Blue, that was the chess-playing computer that was beating Kasparov. And then in the 2000s, and the mid-2000s, and then 2010, deep neural networks came up, so that we not just do one layer, but we are stacking at least 3 or 4 layers in order to just be more flexible and also be more comprehensive in what type of tasks AIs can develop. There was IBM Watson beating Jeopardy. This is again one thing where a lot of attention was drawn towards the field. And of course, in the end, we had AlphaGo and AlphaZero again. This was groundbreaking in terms of a computer can play these games and develop novel strategies. And in the end, we had of course, ChatGPT in the end of 2022, which really brought up the hype again. And if we look into this is what we call the AI summers and winters. So we have these technologies that develop. First the technologies come, then we do have applications. This is also when the papers would then come in. If I kind of plot the other chart again, where I just changed the scale. So you really see that the hype comes, people try to use it, and then there is some type of disappointment, and then funding goes down, and we have seen that. We have seen this at least 2-3 times. We don't know where we are going right now, but I think this is why one of the points I would like to make is like we have to understand what we're currently doing. We have to work on the expectations and also look into how we can actually use AI. And this is what I would like to talk for the rest of my presentation, which is we know that we have this huge interest of AI, and we do know that there is a lot of potential in the healthcare field because we can be more efficient. This is what Marius said. So there is a lot of overuse, and we know that we will have less people that can be in the healthcare sector, healthcare workers, and more people to be taken care of. So I have found this figure kind of nice because it puts in different sectors. It unfortunately it still leaves out the part of the healthcare administration, but for sure we can kind of look into self-care and self-management. We can use AI, and we have applications for diagnosis, for triage. Then we also have clinical decision support, and I would like to just point out that usually the core goals of these applications when they are proposed is assuring the quality of care. So it's really a patient-centered approach, and also the automation bit, which I think is really something where we can excel if we do it right. I brought a few examples because otherwise it would probably be a 5-hour talk, but for diagnostics. So something where we're really good at and where we have good examples is in radiology, digital pathology. In both, this is really something where we can do the assistance. So we can speed up processes. So we can use an AI to do a first check and to point us into certain fields. I would always say it's an extended hand. It helps us in the process. It's the same for surgeries. You can locate where you have to do an operation. You can do quality assurance. So there's a lot of things where we can really excel and make the progress or the healthcare systems better. And also risk predictions, like types of stratifications. There are statistical methods, but AI, with the possibility to be more granular, can also help to kind of be more specific. And then I'm talking about personalized medicine. A quick one on types of methods. Of course, if we do diagnostics and digital pathology or radiology, image recognition is a very prominent one. So using deep learning techniques plus some type of explanation helps us to identify critical areas this is an MR patient, so that you basically find areas in the brain that need to be watched. It can also help to kind of watch the patient over time so that we can see changes. And I mean, this looks very easy when you kind of get this presented, but of course, when you get the scans in, it's so many images that need to go through, and where you have to find the right slice to point at what is going on or what is wrong. So this is just one example. A second one I would like to draw attention to, because I mean, we have been involved, so I have a bit of a personal interest, but I think it's also something that I think we should really care about. It's the chronic care management, because we have a huge number of in the population that have chronic health issues. So being able to do self-management, but also improving home care is really key. Because this will affect a lot of people, and especially what I know from an application that we run for low back pain, it really affects the output, because people are sick at home and cannot kind of go to work and kind of contribute to the society. So some of the AI methods we have been using, this is my core research, it's something called case-based reasoning. It's a technique that has been developed in the 80s. It's very transparent, very explainable, not so much known, but when working in the healthcare field, I can see we can easily build trust, because we can say, okay, in the end, I can show you which case we have used to make this decision. So these transparency aspects, and there are methods that are already out there, but the potential is not used. Another one is really the prediction models and personalized care, so that we can use data, and I mean, Marius pointed at the European data health space, but we have data available to build models, and I think tapping into this and saying, okay, this is really something where we can benefit from all the work that has run into is really key. And of course, natural language processing, this can be large language models. We work on them. I'm still not convinced whether this is the right way all the time in terms of sustainability, in terms of talent, because they are really challenging to be built and handled and understood. However, there is a huge potential to analyze medical records, especially if we talk about chronic patients, because often you have to go back years and years and years and find a trajectory. And this is where we can help. Also, I think unstructured data provide a lot of insight, so that we have not really tapped on. Future trends, of course, this is interesting and always a bit risky. So I said large language models, and I think those need to be trustworthy and factful. We have done more and more work on this now, but I think if we use them in healthcare, they should not produce beautiful sentences. They should provide correct information. And I think this is something we really need to work on. Something very interesting what they do is they can provide information to the patient in a very nice way. There was a study just very recently where ChatGPT-4 was used to explain a condition to patients. And it is impressive to see how better patients would like the answer explained by ChatGPT. It is not doing anything and comparing and finding solutions, but it takes the time to explain, and you can interact with this. And I think this is a huge potential. I don't think we should always put the entire language model onto solving the problem, but taking the time to slowly go through a process towards a patient is really a huge potential, and I think there is something we can learn from. And the other part is multimodal data. So we have the patient history, here we have different types of scans, we will have different levels of quality, and bringing this to a level that we can support a decision, I think is really something we can work on. Yes, and I think we have a number of untapped potential in terms of AI. One thing is, we really need to understand why we do need AI. I mean, I'm an AI researcher, I love to do these projects, but the amount of requests we get is too large. We need to say, this is an AI problem, this is not. And if we don't manage, we will never be able to have the staff, the people that can actually run these projects in a credible way. So we also have to say, no, just build a rule set and you're done. It doesn't have to be a deep neural network that you as a company will not be able to manage. So this is really something to pick our fights right. The second part is find tasks that we can automate, because this is where AI is really good at. Find tasks where, like when I see a clinician copying things all the time, this is something software should do. It's not people that should be doing it. But if we have an interaction with a patient, this is where we should put our resources into, our human resources into. And of course, for high-stake decisions, pick the best AI method and not the most prominent right now. So if we really have a high-stakes decision, we want to have this transparent. We want to kind of show the whole process, how a decision was made, and not just give a result and then say, we think statistics say. This is, I think, not good enough. So if it's really an important decision, we need to kind of bring people along and also explain how the reasoning of the AI method went. This was it. I hope I kind of stayed in my time. And then I think I will hand over to the next speaker, Marius.
Thank you very much, Kerstin. You were actually 1 minute ahead, so that's good. Our next speaker is Dominique Chu. So I just need to change that. So he's a lecturer at the School of Computing at the University of Kent, and he is a theoretical physicist where he has previously focused on complex models to solve real-world problems, which is definitely what we're dealing with here. He has moved on to more interdisciplinary research on systems biology and neural networks, but he has a really strong interest in the related philosophical questions and how we can conduct responsible research and science. So with that, I would like you to talk to us about how we can conduct responsible research and innovation on AI in healthcare. So I'll just bring up your presentation.
Still working? Yes. Hi. So while we're waiting, I should perhaps say I'm just pretending to be all of these things. So what I'm doing actually most of my time is developing novel algorithms to learn, to train neural networks. Particularly I'm interested in spiking neural networks. And I just pretend to be really a theoretical physicist. That's something I would have liked to be, but never managed to become. So, but by training I am, so I can still put it on my CV. And my philosophical ambitions, well, it's amateurish, but I will try to do my best here now to say something interesting. I'll let you be the judge of this. Yeah. And I can prepare presentations that wreck computer systems. So, no, it hasn't wrecked it. Is it working now? Shall I try? I think that normally works. Huh? Yeah, it should work, yeah. So, shall we try? Yeah, it's working. So I have 15 minutes, so until roughly 10:02, right? Yeah. Yeah, so I've introduced myself already, so I can go straight to the first slide, and I thought I'd start with an outline and take-home messages. So the structure of this talk is actually more a stream of consciousness, so in a way there is no structure to this talk, so I thought it would be good to front-load it with some insights. But still there's a little bit of structure, so I'm having some general thoughts on AI and healthcare, and there's nothing very deep, that's really general thoughts that should stimulate the discussion. And then I sort of take a sharp turn to talk a little bit about explainability. That's something that's talked about very frequently, and I think is in need of some more discussion and some more analysis. So I'm not pretending to have any final well thought through arguments here, but really stimulation for discussion. But coming to the take-home messages here. So the first take-home message is really that AI tech, like any other tech, has an agency. And in the sense that we cannot expect that we have a technology here and we can predict what the outcomes are. But in reality, technologies are developed and then they start to interact with society in ways that we cannot predict. And this is something that we have to keep in mind as we do research in AI. And that was also said in one of the panels, sort of by this person from the Norwegian Research Council, that a lot of the costs actually in bringing to market technologies has nothing to do with the development of the technology itself, but other things. And I think these managing the agency of technologies is one of these things. So, and I have to be quite clear, when I mean agency in AI, I don't mean that they suddenly become sentient and take over the world. So I mean it really in the sense that other technologies are also they may become, of course, sentient and take over the world, but I don't know about this. So the other thing I want to say is that it's often not clear when we talk about explainability in AI what we actually mean and why this is important. So I have some thoughts about this. And so this is the second take-home message. So in a way, you can go to sleep now. There's not much more in this talk, but I still continue because I have 15 minutes to fill, or more 10 minutes now. So first one is healthcare is a complex system, and this has to do with the agency. And what do I mean by this is that there are high stakes involved with this, clearly the health of people. But there is also a lot of money at stake, and there is perception of competence of the policymakers. So if we have a healthcare system that's in chaos, then this reflects poorly on the politicians who do it. So this is something that has to be taken into account. So there's also a large number of stakeholders, and they have different interests, and often conflicting interests, but often incommensurable interests. So we cannot compare them. So managing this is difficult often to understand why things are done, why certain agendas are there, and what is interesting. And there's high uncertainty, and I'm not going to read this out, but there's uncertainty about in the data, there's uncertainty about perspectives and values of the stakeholders. And there's uncertainty about the behavior of the technology itself. So we don't know if what I said before, if we release the technology, we don't know how it's going to interact with society. So all of this needs to be managed. And the argument I want to make here is that introducing healthcare, AI into healthcare, it's an intervention into complex systems and requires a quite broad approach that cannot be reduced to just research in academic institutions. And I think that's really the main point to make here. So that this is also one of the take-home messages I said before. And I would like to point out here the first point here that I made here and didn't mention here. There's also an uncertainty about the global impact of AI. And what I mean by this is something that is not talked about often enough. That artificial intelligence relies on fairly complex and expensive computing power. And this requires a lot of electricity and has global impact. When coal was invented first and the first steam engines were introduced, no one thought about this, but now we have the mess of climate change as a result. And so I think this is something that should get much more attention in the discussion, even though it has nothing to do directly with healthcare, but it has to do something with AI. And what are the global impacts and how can we minimize them? So I think this is something that's very important and should be talked about much more. So let me talk about the possible uses of AI in healthcare. And I mean, Kerstin had some much better examples than I have, but I would just like to have some 3 categories that I think are important. So, or example of categories. One is that you could use AI to just optimize processes in healthcare, and that's probably not a particular difficult application and not problematic. There are others where AI is already used a lot in biomedical research, drug development, and these sort of things where then suddenly we get issues that are frequently discussed, have to do with data, consent, but also research ethics, but also environmental impacts here I put there. But then there's another sort of application of AI, which is more patient-facing, where I could come into clinical use, and there's then suddenly the scope for life and death decisions by AI. And that's where I think it's really interesting and really difficult, and where we enter, in a way, new territory that we haven't seen in the past, and it's worthwhile thinking a lot about this. So let me now drill down a bit. So when we have patient-facing AI, what sort of things could that be? Well, there are various things. AI could just be a tool in the box. That's a bit what Kerstin was talking about. And probably that's happening already, that doctors, as they come to a diagnosis, consult large language models to find information. More directly, we could think that AI becomes a member of a clinical team. So we have a doctor, another doctor, and then the AI that then helps in the team, and they're working somehow together, possibly robotics as well. And this is already where the patient would come in direct contact with the AI, but there would still be human involvement. And the next step, and that's something that's, don't know whether this ever will be realized, although I think Star Trek has this, is a doctor AI. So you have a machine, you just hold this to the body, and then a diagnosis is made and possibly treatment as well. And then we could get there into a state where we have a perhaps healthcare self-checkout. So the patient goes somewhere, goes to the machine, presses a button, diagnosis made, treatment also suggested. There are sort of conflicting rationalities if we get to this point, where do patients actually like this? How could we introduce this? So there's a whole complexity associated with this. But also there could be new problems, so that you get personalized medicine, but also possibly a personalized estimate of the value of the treatment to you. Say, according to my machine learning model, you will contribute 125,000 euros to the economy for the rest of your life. your treatment would cost 200,000. I suggest we terminate you straight away, or something like this, right? So there's a risk there that one would have to think about. Another thing, and this is now talked about a lot, that prevents us actually from getting there at the moment, is accountability. And this has to do very often with what is something going wrong. So we have an AI that makes a treatment, or say an AI that makes a diagnosis. The diagnosis is wrong, there's harm to the patient. Whose fault is it? And there are then legal questions that are coming in there. And what is here very often required in order to deal with this as a part of this, and this is explainability. And I couldn't help but ask an AI to explain to me what explainability means. And this is according to Bing. I'm not going to read this out, but what's clear here, explainability is linked to, according to Bing here, that was, 3 days ago I did that, is linked to accuracy, fairness, transparency, and so on. So this is what AI thinks about the explainability of AI. I have my own thoughts that I thought I should also bring to the table here. So the first thought I have here is that I never quite understand what it means. And at least 2 distinctions we can make here, which I find useful. And one is that we have explainability in terms of assurability, and this is what Bing seems to think. So that we can be sure that the model works and that it's tested. But there's another interpretation of explainability, and there's interpretability. And when we talk about it, when in debates, that's often meant. And this is that we can actually understand the particular factors that lead to the decision of an AI system. So why is it doing this decision rather than that? How important are these weights? Or something like this. And there's also then, in the discussion very often, in debates it's coming up very often, this question, explainability to whom? So who needs to understand the system? Is it the user, so in this case the patient, that needs to understand it? Or is it sufficient that we have some trusted group of experts who understand the AI system? Or is it maybe perhaps sufficient, and I tend to argue for this, that that the system is just explainable in principle. So we know there's no magic happening and it's reproducible, but we probably don't know the explanation at present, but we know there is some that could be produced at some point. So, and then the question is also, when we talk about interpretability, what sort of explanations would we like to have? So the first one is that we could think of, we know the factors that were important for an AI to reach the decision. I mentioned this before. Another very desirable kind of explainability would be that we have rules. So the AI produces rules which can be used to reach a decision. So then the AI makes a decision, but we could reproduce this. And possibly we could even learn from these rules so that in the next time we don't need the AI and we learn new relationships in nature. Or another way to think about interpretability is that there's simply a mathematical explanation for that. So we have a mathematical theory that tells us, say, what's the relationship between weights and a particular decision. Most of the technological approaches to explanation, to interpretability, focus on this first point. But I would think that this third point would also be something that's very interesting, but it's possibly impossible. It will be difficult or challenging to achieve this, at least in the context of models like neural networks, where I think this would be asked too much. So I will just quickly jump over this because I'm nearing the end of my talk here. So another question here that one could think about is how desirable are AI systems now that actually are not interpretable. So certainly if we have a system that is interpretable and performs equally well as humans, then we may want to use it because it helps in some case. But what if we have something that's much better than humans? So we know it works very well, but it's an absolute black box. Is it really a problem to use it? I would say no, it isn't, but many people seem to be concerned about it. And I think it would be useful to say exactly what the concern here is, for as long as we have assurability at least. is it really important that we are able to interpret exactly what's going on in the model? And I don't think it is. And I don't think it is because we usually don't use the standards in other walks of life. So if we, for example, have a witness in a murder case, then the brain of the witness is a black box. So if I say, well, I've seen you with the knife sticking into this person, then the court may want to check whether I'm a reliable witness, so this is the assurability. But the court is not interested in the particular neuronal processes that enable me to recognize you or to match you to the person I've seen that evening sticking. I know you didn't, but you know, you're just the victim here because you're sitting in the front row. So we usually don't require interpretability in other walks of life. Only some sort of assurance, and often this assurance is quite weak. So, I mean, you could say that the professional registration of a doctor is a, well, semi-good assurance that the doctor makes good decision. But then actually in the realm of healthcare, if we have drugs, so often it's absolutely not clear how a drug works. We don't understand the molecular processes that leads to particular physiological processes. And then there's some sort of assurance before they are coming to market, and it's clinical trials, but this is rather weak assurance. So the statistical power of these tests is low, and often drugs come to market that then have to be withdrawn based on post-marketing pharmacovigilance, where it's found that they are harmful or that they have interactions that we didn't know about. So there's fairly weak assurance in healthcare already in high-stakes context, where we also have absolutely no interpretability, and everyone is comfortable with that, actually, because there's value to it. So my concluding thoughts, I have them here, and that just links back to the take-home messages I had at the beginning. So do we really need this sort of explainability? What if we want interpretability, what should be the standard of it, and why are we insisting on this? And I think this would be a valuable discussion to have. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dominique. I will take that. Thank you for the interesting talk. Next out is Karim Berkouk. Is that right? He's a policy officer in the European Commission and in a new unit for Industry 5.0 and AI in science. And he has previously worked in the unit for combating disease and has also led the policies on AI in health. So he will talk to us about how AI in science can benefit the health sector. Karim, no. Yeah. Okay, good.
I thought it's the first time I do this talk on AI in science, and I took slides from Lars Daniel. So it's actually Karim Berkouk. So as Marius mentioned, I worked like for 12 years in health research, and I moved like 3 months ago in this newly created unit on AI in science. Our view about AI in science is that it's going to accelerate, increase the productivity, but the real issue is really the scale and also the generation of new knowledge that we couldn't have in the past. And it's not only our view, it's the view of the big tech, as you have seen, and here are some quotes from the CEO of DeepMind about the powerful acceleration for scientific discovery. Jan de Kuhn also mentioning about the use of AI in science, in particular in medicine. And the one from Sam Altman is about knowledge creation, and I think that's a key one for going to the next step of health. May I go there? And it's not only it's not only the big tech, It's also our international organization. And one citation from this report from the OECD, accelerating the productivity of research could be the most economically and socially valuable of all uses of artificial intelligence, because it's a prism through which we can really expand the application of AI. Go back to the slides on publication. Kerstin mentioned the growth of AI application. This is another way to do it, but from 2003. And we can see that globally in the last 25 years, the growth was 15% superior compared to other publication. And we can see some moment where the curve goes down. I don't know if it's linked to the crisis or because it looks like 2008, and here it's after COVID, so I don't know, probably the government had less money at this time, and the first, unfortunately, budget that they cut when they need further money is research, so probably that might explain that. And here is a figure comparing the EU, China, and the US. And what I want to show here is that we tend to say that we're really behind on AI in Europe, but when you look at these graphs, up to 2017, we were at, for the last 10 years, 2005 to 2015, we were leading in terms of the number of publications and also in the quality of the papers. We have also the same trend in the most cited publication. But from 2017, and here is where China really went up, and they're growing much faster than us. So we still have an issue here that we have to invest more in basic research in order to catch up. But the main message from this, for me, is that we were leading, and we are not that far off. If we step up our investment, we can catch up and be leading again. So that's what I just mentioned. We have a strong scientific basis in Europe, and it's probably the hardest thing to achieve. So the basis is good, but where we lack something is more like to transfer this knowledge into application in the real world, and the innovation part, where traditionally we are a bit weaker for many reasons. It's also about the market. We have 27 countries. In the US, you have one country. In China, you have one country. It's much easier to scale up in these countries compared to Europe. We have published in December a list of projects funded by the European Commission. And there you will see there are many examples about health in general. And if I just come back 1 second here, I forgot to say that China is leading, but it's not the case in health. In health, is the US first, and we are just behind still now in terms of publication. So it's not all the field where we are below. In particular, engineering and all these things is more for China, but environmental studies and especially health, the EU is on the same level as the US. So of course we see AI in science is of course for science, but the aim behind is really to tackle the big problem of our society. On health, like medical diagnostic, emergencies, chronic diseases, which is our main problem in Europe. As mentioned, all the problem that comes with AI, we heard through Dominique, the explainability, the reproducibility, which was a big problem in science for many years. Maybe now we have some possibilities to address it a bit better. The data challenge and the computational resources are key for the AI of the future. But in health in particular, I think that Europe has the best health data in the world. So we are best place. We don't exploit it enough. And again, the talent shortage. This is not a question of a university. It's more after to retain the people here in Europe. We have talents all over Europe, everywhere, even in the lower country, we have talents. The educational systems are good, but after they move where l'herbe est plus verte, so the grass is greener, and mainly they go to the US and Canada. And we have to do that, of course, with the public trust. Otherwise, no way our solution will be taken up in the real world. So what do we do at the EU level? We have published a policy brief also in December. And there is a quote from the VP Vestager that really AI is a must and that we should level up a little bit our investments in this area. The policy objectives are in two parts. One is the acceleration of uptake in AI in science, and that's meaning providing access to more data. You mentioned the European health data space that we are developing. And also it will have to come with more money if we want to catch up. So the understanding where we should invest our money, and I remind you that the EU has only 10% of the research funding in Europe. The 90% are in the member states, so we have also to coordinate what the member states are doing. And at the same time, we have to go to the level of the researcher for scientific integrity, interdisciplinarity, which is not still completely implemented, and preserve the trust, as I was mentioning. So the areas of action, first one is the talent, how to keep them in Europe. The data, we have many European data space. We have a European HPC, high performance computer. We tend to say at European level to the researcher, is there, why don't you use it? But we realize that it's not that easy to access them, and that the application to access this HPC is not that straightforward. So we have some work to do on this aspect. The funding is key, of course, and we are new, but we are trying to see to develop our strategy, and we are consulting a lot the scientific community, and that's it for that. And what are the other policy work that we are doing? We have what we call the scientific advice mechanism, which is a body of usually 15, 20 scientists that advise us on some specific questions, and we ask them to help us with the AI in science. And they just released a report last week. So it's a little bit like we have seen before. It's about the people, about access to data, and the powerful computing, but also a recommendation for regulation or not, how to fund and how to outreach the society. Oops. Oh, maybe it's the end. I thought I had one, 2 or 3, but otherwise I can do it myself.
There? Yeah.
Okay. Another initiative is the mutual learning exercise with the member states. As I mentioned, 90% of the funding of public research are in the member states. And we start seeing Many countries developing their own strategy alone. And that's really a difficulty at a European level. We always trying to do catch up. People do their initiatives, and after we try to bring them together and align. So for AI, we wanted to do it differently because we are there from the beginning. And so we are trying to see, to bring them, some countries, there are 8 or 9 at the moment that they are working together in order to really define commonalities. And you may have some personal interest or national interest, but most of the things that you're developing in AI will be relevant for many countries. So we're trying to align and coordinate a little bit that. And we have co-created some guidelines on the responsible use of generative AI. Again, many institutes, many countries have defined some guidelines, but where do the researchers go at the end to actually carry out their research? That's what we're trying to do with these guidelines. What I want to mention is that the guidelines are not only for researchers, they're also for research organizations, and they're also for research funding organizations like us. They were co-created with member states and the scientific community. The principles are the research integrity, and as mentioned in the previous talks, AI is changing so fast that it cannot be a guidelines for life. So every 6 months, we intend to update them depending on the new trend. And it's not to be published in March, it has been published in March. Apparently last did this presentation before March. And that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Karim. Yeah. Okay, so now we will have a discussion. So I will just ask the speakers to come up. We'll try to sit together. Yeah, okay. I just bring this.
Oh, this one?
Other slides for these segments?
No, no more slides. No. Okay, so there's another microphone. Okay, so thank you for interesting talks, all of you. Obviously, I mean, there's a lot of things to do in terms of both research and creating impact, and also on the policy level to be able to do that. And so I would just like to start the discussion with sort of in terms of how we can how AI and digitization in general can advance the research and innovations we need in the health domain. What do you think are the most important research questions or topics that we need to address ahead? Do you want to start? Yeah.
At least I can start with a few. I think one part that also Dominique started to mention is explainability. From the work we do, we see that there is a lot of requests for trustworthiness and robustness of AI applications. We have one of the partners in the research center, and they kind of produced a guideline on how to build trustworthy applications, which I think is very interesting, because the one thing is talking about it, but also the giving companies or researchers guidelines on how to get to a trustworthy application. So it's not only, because it's not just we can measure something, because in this trustworthy process, we also need to incorporate the user. And this brings me probably to the second point, which is around user-centered AI. So not only building AI applications, but also understanding how people are using it. and how trust is built, how they actually interact. Because often we also see we build something and then the humans use it in a completely different area, different way as we do. So I think getting more of those interdisciplinary research and kind of coming up with research questions that address both technology but also the human interaction with it, because I think this is how we can get more traction, at least on the research field.
Yeah, I'll go maybe not exactly on the research question, but question about health and what we should tackle. And it's a little bit what Kerstin was saying with the low-hanging fruit. There are many tasks that are repetitive, that are tedious. I think there AI will be a great job. But after there are the other part, which is the knowledge creation, like being able to find new type of drugs. This type of thing that is taking tens of years before you reach that. We can accelerate that. We have the case of AlphaFold with the MBL. I think they estimated that to have done what they have done in the last 5-6 years, you would have needed 1 million researchers to do the same task. So in a few years, you can do what researchers were going to do in million years. And AI has to be there where we are not doing well in health. What I think that we're not doing well in health is, for instance, prevention. We don't know how to do very good prevention. And I think those questions that we were not able to answer in the past, AI will help us at least address them better.
Yeah, so that's a difficult question. What's the most important use of AI for healthcare? So I'm not sure. I would like to answer that. Like you didn't answer it, and you didn't really answer it. But have some general thoughts on this. And one thing, and you alluded to this, is that yeah. So certainly one way AI is going to make healthcare research more productive is in the same way as Excel is making it more productive. So rather than handwriting spreadsheets or putting the data on a piece of paper and then doing complex calculation that takes a student perhaps 3 days, that can be done now straight away. And you can even make this more efficient with things like Python now, that every bioscientist now knows how to program Python, so they are much more efficient in that way. And AI is probably going to be most important as a similar sort of tool in the box that just allows you to do things much faster, so you can do more, so that accelerates the research. So when it comes then to, but I think what you were really fishing for is a different sort of thing. That's more that we have fundamental use of or more core AI action for healthcare research. So there's really something where AI is not just a supporting role, but can do something novel, so discover new molecular pathways or new drugs. And partially this is ongoing already. And but if we, for example, use this in the clinic, then the most important, so what's quite important here is to and I'm just repeating my presentation to some extent, is to understand that the AI methods that we get from Silicon Valley, they are produced for the problems that Silicon Valley has and for the resources they have. So they have a huge number of extremely good computer scientists and a huge amount of data. That's and they can collect as much as they want. When we then, in the context of a healthcare setting, want to use AI, then we often don't have access to these highly trained computer scientists. And we don't have this huge amount of data, and also the stakes are completely different ones. So there is I think, societal negotiation process that needs to happen in to what extent we actually want to integrate AI into healthcare, and in what context, and and this is something that has to develop. And so this sociological aspect of this is something that's very important.
Just keep it. Yeah, so this sort of brings us over to what we need to to achieve it, both in terms of doing the research. You were talking about having access to both competence within computer science and also the data. And I know, like you said, Karim, we have probably the best health data in the world, but we don't use the potential. So how can we bring that potential out, both in terms of research more at the research institutions, but also towards the industry and the private sector? How can we capitalize on these assets that we really have?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned for me the four key aspects are the data, the talent, the computing power, and the investment into it. When it comes to data, we are doing a step towards some European health data space where you would have all the data from patients in every country in a dream. In a dream cloud, all the data would be there. And you can do whatever research on it. You have the past history, you have the images, and you can do some monitoring. Also, you were talking about pharmacovigilance. You could do that. There are so many things you could do once this is there. Unfortunately, those data are not that readily available for research or for other groups than the people that have generated it. I think that at a certain time we will need to recompensate the researchers that have generated the data. Like you have a H index for the performance in terms of bibliography. You would have a data index on how many data you will bring, and if it is recognized and if those data are used by many other people, that's the recognition that your work was well done. And I think if we can switch a little bit, I'm not saying that we need a data index, but the recognition of the generation of data, people will be more willing to share it and to make it for the others. Take just an example of cohorts. When you carry out cohorts of people, you have to follow the people for 10, 15 years. And as soon as you have the data, you don't want to share them directly with everybody. You want to exploit it a little bit before it goes to the others. So if in that case you are giving some incentive for the people to share, they would do it because it would be good for them, basically.
Yeah, I think it's also different types of data that we work with. I mean, for example, what I have learned over the years is we often have this very interesting cohort studies, but not everyone can really understand and comprehend what we're doing. So, and for AI researchers, it is often the method and the experiments. So make it easier for them to run their methods or experiments on the data. We have one example where we have a large study and we collected physical activity data of 35,000 people. And our idea is like we would like to understand based on sensors whether they're sitting, standing, walking, and so on. We have a subset of data where we used volunteers and created a training data set. And this training data set, then we can get the consent, it's much easier to manage, to publish it. And we see that people start to use this data set. Sometimes they do very weird things with it, but it could still be interesting just monitoring and seeing whether this can influence our research. And also what I learned in discussing with people from third world countries, they just don't have the capacities to collect and create this data. So if we use the data that we have, make it available on any platform. So, and also educate our PhD students that this is part of your tasks. It's not necessarily, also getting credits for it and having, papers that say, okay, this is an excellent data set. I think this is really important to change a bit and to get this global perspective, because there might be classes that want to run a Kaggle competition. So make the data available where people go and run these competitions. There are people that just like to play with this type of data. So using the kind of the brains that we have more efficiently, I think is really important.
Thank you. And so in terms of all this data and these data are originally coming from some patients or some people in our countries, and we are definitely dependent on their trust, and that we treat the data in accordance with what we have promised them, and also that we give it back. But in terms of consenting to using data, and what we researchers really would like was a really broad consent, so we can mine the data and so on. But there is some skepticism in the public about this. So are there ways that we can address that to sort of enhance the use of the data, and also assuring the people that we treat the data well, securely, and also bring value back to them?
I have a quick comment, which is probably more of a question. It's interesting because we share our data with Google and Apple all the time. But if it comes into, putting it into a data storage where we could do research and benefit from it, it's more difficult. And I think it's one of the things that we don't necessarily want to say what it will be used, because we don't know. But this creates some type of mistrust, because then people are like, okay, maybe it will be to my disadvantage. And I think this is something we still need to figure out how to communicate and how to make it easier to provide data. I think maybe this is, if we look into we all have an iPhone or Android phone, and all the data is stored automatically on US clouds. So being able to tap onto this, because I think many people are willing to share. It's just to kind of get this consent more easily with the technology we have.
Yeah, I agree with what you said very much, that there's a certain disconnection between our willingness to just give our life away to Google, but then other sort of things we get very, very skeptical about. There are also there are certain things I never quite understood. So, for example, there's nothing to do with health research, but more with criminal justice. So there is, at least in the UK, there's a big concern about the police retaining DNA samples of you. And I never quite understood what the problem there is, because I think it would be very good if everyone just, if of every citizen the police had the DNA sample, we could solve a lot of crime very, very, very cheaply. And I don't see the problem of the police having this data, but maybe there's something I don't understand. Anyway, at the same time, there's a big desire within the public for safety and security. So there's, but coming back to the assurance. So what, having thought about this in the recent past, one thing that struck me is that, at least in my university, there's absolutely no training on this for computer scientists, students, at least. So if someone goes through our AI program, then they haven't learned anything about assurance and dealing with these ethical and legal questions. I don't know how it is in Norway, maybe it's different. But that seems to me an important part of overcoming this problem, this communication with the public and dealing with stakeholders, that we simply give the students the skills to do that.
No, I will just add that I'm not sure the patient don't want to share his data. When he has a disease, an important disease, usually they want to share their data. It's more the legislation that doesn't allow it that fast. But especially because you have to say the purpose of your research. If we could get maybe with the electronic means easier way to get a new consent to people and to reach them. Okay, you have your data there. If you have the email or something like that with the explanation that, or go to a platform like you could say yes, you can go ahead. Maybe that would help also to for that. And yeah, I agree. It's a question of education also, and education on the reason why you want to use it, and trust into science. And we go back to trust into science, which is fading away. We have seen that under the COVID, and we have to make big effort for that, because otherwise it's a big problem for the society, and democracy is at stake in those cases.
Okay, so I think we have 5 minutes left. They're cutting us short. But we talked about research, and I want to move a little bit on to more how we create impact and succeed in actually doing research and development that creates a difference in our healthcare system. And I think that one important issue there is how we build trustworthy products and services. Both you talked about it, sort of trust what meets the patients, what meets the doctors. They need to be sure, and I think it's I think it's interesting what you brought up, Kerstin, that I mean, if the language is good, then people tends to trust it more, and that brings if you look at patient-centered services, which really is a very open market in terms of what, I mean, ChatGPT, you can ask it medical questions, it will answer. So how can we sort of make sure that what the people meet out there in terms of patient-centered are that they prefer or use the correct sources, what is actually accurate, more than what that they meet the trust in that.
Maybe some thoughts. I think one part is literacy, like educating people what trustworthy internet sources are, and how also AI literacy, like if people would know what ChatGPT is doing, I think the trust changes. Because I mean, I give these talks a lot, and one of the things is it's not an information resource, because it's made for making beautiful sentences, and the information content is second. And I think there's a lot of those things also with health literacy, and how to use digital tools in general, and how to be able as a user to understand this is trustworthy, this is not trustworthy. Because if it comes in a shiny, easy to use manner, that does not mean that you can trust it, and that does not mean that it doesn't tap into your data. And I think especially what is scary with some of these tools is that they collect so much data about you in the background, and then try to kind of convince you to use it more. And I think this understanding what is a trustworthy tool, and also understanding that sometimes these tools don't want you to stay on longer, because once you have the information, you should go on with your life. And there are a lot of tools that are just made to stick onto the app. And I think this is one of the challenges we are up against when we kind of build these tools.
Yeah, so I would very much agree with that. That what you talk about really is a problem for a almost democratic society that requires a new type of media training that I haven't received in school, because the internet didn't exist. Well, the internet existed, but wasn't widespread when I was in school. And what we really need to start at age 7 to teach children how to distinguish trustworthy sources from non-trustworthy sources. And that will take some time before this sinks in. At the moment, we're still in this euphoria of, we have all this new information, but as the speaker yesterday said, in, trash out. So this will be really the task for our society to create a new generation that is able to deal with this information overload and read selectively and be critical.
Yeah, me, I would say two things. Of course, I completely agree with you, but I would add two things. Maybe we need some models that are developed by public funding and not necessarily by big companies or big tech. I think there will be much more trust into that. And the second part, I think we need also models that are developed by health professionals, but with the help of this AI. You mentioned that when the explanation was done by ChatGPT, the patient felt much better. It means that there is a gap there in the health professionals that we could compensate with the help of technology, but with the assurance, as you mentioned, of the health professionals. So with the combination, I think we can reach a higher level of trust in our system.
And what about in terms of the healthcare systems? I mean, adoption of new technology and ensuring a digital transformation of our healthcare systems. It seems to be a very slow process. My experience is within many fields that you just add on the technology and keep on working as you have before, rather than change the way you work. So, is there a way do we need policies? Do we need research? How can we ensure this type of innovation in the future?
May I start? Yeah. I think it's quite simple. We need to ask the end users what they need. Usually we develop technologies without the people who are going to use it, and then we try to impose it to them. If they are part of the process, because they know that they have many problems in everyday life. If you tell them, okay, what can we do for solving that, and then we build the technology, and then I think the adoption will be much faster.
Yeah, I very much agree. I think we also need to have sometimes an easier way to bring like sandboxes in an existing healthcare system. So to basically test things out early. And to get feedback from users, not from, I come with my computer and do something very special, but like I can deploy it in your work environment in a testing field, and you can see and say, this is good or this is bad. So to kind of have these cycles faster when we are developing. So kind of this integration, because it's so hard just to be able to do research in an active healthcare system. So I think to kind of bridge this gap. And then it's people. I mean, it's you need advocates that say this really saves so many hours during my week.
If I may add, and it goes along you say, we need to develop much more implementation research, where you don't develop a new idea, but you know that this idea has worked there, and you want to implement it in another place, and you analyze all the factors beforehand, like the culture in this country might be different, they don't have the same resources, and once you have this understanding, you can fine-tune the solution to the local needs.
Yeah, I very much agree with you. And you mentioned that it's so much easier to scale up in the US and China because it's one country. And I mean, I don't know how many countries around Europe, but you probably have it. But there's so many countries, and there's so much diversity in the healthcare systems. So, I mean, it's probably impossible, but should we do something about it? Is there a way we can smooth this way of adopting new technologies across different healthcare systems?
If I may, if the principles are good, I think every country will want to apply it. But as I mentioned, you cannot have the same solution for all the countries. Each time you have to adapt it to the country and the culture. I mean, there are some countries where they don't trust medical doctors. In Europe, you will have a different approach compared to countries where the doctors are seen as almost God. And you have to change the solution according to this belief and the laws also, and the reimbursement rate, and there are many factors that you have to take into account for making sure that the digital transformation happens.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we need to close the session. Thank you very much to the speakers for presenting and also discussing, and we have a small gift for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I hope it's less than 50 euros. Otherwise, I cannot take it.
I don't know. I think it's okay. Yeah, got it cheap. Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much. Yeah, I think you needed some applause. And there will be lunch served, I think, outside here, and we will meet back in the plenary room at 13:30 for the last closing session. Thank you very much.